first met U2 in Dublin sometime. I don't remember the actual meeting, but I think they were called The Hype at the time, just changing their name to U2. And my first impression on their sound was nothing special in particular, because at the time I was just starting in pirate radio, and I was being handed demo tapes by lots of people. They were one of the bands that gave me the demo tape. At the time, it would have been that the Undertones had their first album out, the Boomtown Rats had their first album out, and I was much more interested in that kind of sound, in kind of power pop of the Undertones and, you know, rhythm and blues of the pubs of the Boomtown Rats, a bit of a kind of a Stones kind of thing, than I was in the U2 sound. But I thought, yeah, this is good, whatever. Lots of things are good, and I'm into anything different, and U2 were that bit different. But they didn't strike me at the beginning as being anything special, to be perfectly honest.
This is out of control.
They were different to a lot of other bands, but that doesn't mean they were good different. They were just different, that's all. And yet lots of bands were different. I mean, I could put 10 Irish bands at the time into 10 different categories and say, well, they're a bit this and they're a bit that. And well, U2 were just their own sound, but it wasn't like something I said, wow, that's so different, it's fantastic. I didn't notice that at all. I never really see a band with their first few demo tapes as being a successful band. That's not really the way it works with me. It's just whatever.
11 o'clock! Sing song!
Yeah, there were a few, all right. The early gigs were always full of energy, I'll give it that. But I mean, again, it wasn't like the music did it for me in a way like some other bands around at the time who were more rooted in a sound that I would have known, like a blues sound or a pub rock sound or something. And they were just different, and yeah, great. But again, nothing special really. The first time they ever played in London, I happened to be there. And the second gig was in a place called the Nashville Rooms, and there were 3 bands playing on that. There was Secret Affair, and there was a kind of a mod revival for about 5 minutes, and Secret Affair with the main band. And there would have only been about 200 people in the pub by the end of the night. The second band, I can't remember their name, and the first band was U2, and there was literally, I know this is going to sound very strange, but the sound man, the guy on the sound, actually had a dog with him, so it was literally one man and his dog watching the band. And I came in with 2 friends, and Paul McGuinness was thrilled to see me there, just a great, whatever. And I remember there couldn't have been any more than, I don't know, maybe about 10, 15 people there, and even half them were over at the bar. And U2 played, and it was just great to see them in London. I can't remember if it was really that great a performance, but it was just great to see them in London. Very soon afterwards, they played a thing in Dublin at the Project Arts Centre, which was a 24-hour kind of happening thing, type of thing that Pink Floyd were doing in London 12 years earlier in 66. And it was a multimedia, lots of things happening within 24 hours, and you could buy a ticket for 6 hours or the whole 24 or whatever. And I remember I went to see U2 because I was reviewing it at that time for Hot Press, and in a room to my left there was a movie being shown called Death Race 2000, and there was at least 250 people at that. This was 3 a.m, and then the band were in another room playing, and there couldn't have been more than about 10 people watching it, or maybe 20. And I remember that was one of the first times I thought, wow, this guy on guitar is something else. It was the first time I saw The Edge really and said, this is really very good. It's just very different as well. The Boy release, I don't remember as much from Boy as I do from the first single, because the first single meant so much to us. You see, I joined National Pop Music Radio in May of 79. That's 41 years ago now. And I had been on Pirates for 2 years, and the band I got most demo tapes from on Pirate was U2. So they were the first band that we brought into this place here to do a session. And also when they decided to bring out their first single, which was quite a little time after they were on the scene. I mean, it wasn't suddenly they bring out a single, they waited. And the single, I don't know why we did this. I mean, it's so weird. We would never normally do it. But myself, producer Ian Wilson, Paul McGuinness, we all came up with this thing of the band will come in 5 nights in a row in the 1 week, play these 3 songs, and the listeners to this programme would decide which would be the A-side and the B-side and which song we'd discard. The A-side and the B-side. In other words, I'm talking about old vinyl. As it turned out, Stories for Boys, Out of Control and Boy Girl. Out of Control was the A-side, and they put the 2 songs on the B-side. So we had a huge part in the first single from U2. And I remember I went to the launch of it in Windmill Lane. And again, there was a bunch of people there, but not a huge amount. And it was the same. People used to have launches of things in those days, and but they, get bad sandwiches and a glass of dodgy wine. And we thought, great, they've got a single out finally. These were special 12-inch singles, and they were putting some work into it at this stage. And that was what I remember more actually than the Boy album. By the time Boy came out, I really liked it. Not as much as some people, but I really liked it a lot. And it was, again, very different. Well, that was 4 or 5 days before they were to play a huge gig in Dublin, in Daleyman Park, I think it was. And R.E.M. were on the bill, Squeeze were on the bill. And it was a big scene. U2 were coming back home, literally having conquered the world. I mean, they had gone as far as Under a Blood Red Sky, which was the end of part 1 of U2. And then they had given Wide Awake in America, which really, really woke everybody up. And then they had a chance to be the next great band in the world, post Live Aid and all the rest, and all they had to do was get it right. And they got it right with the Joshua Tree, no question about it. Every so often a band is handed something to say, here is your chance. You have the chance and nobody else does to really conquer the world. And a lot of people blow it, a lot of people do something different. I mean, Bruce Springsteen, after Born in the USA, went completely insular and brought out an album from inside his own head, and which was very admirable. Radiohead, after OK Computer, went right back into their more experimental side with the Kid A albums and all that sort of stuff. And fair play to them too. But U2 grabbed it with both hands. And remember, the first 3 songs on Joshua Tree were number ones in the States, in the charts, and the album sold trillions of copies and all the rest. So they did it really well. But that was around that time. They just got the album out and felt really good about it. Also, they had asked me to come to do an interview with the band for the album. And it was a bit embarrassing because it was somewhere down in Dublin, it was down in Wicklow in Ardmore Studios, and they were making the video on the day for With or Without You. So I was there for the whole day for that. And then we had a room set up with 5 microphones, one for me and one for the 4 guys, to talk about the album. And the first thing Bono said to me was, have you heard the album? I said, to be honest, I haven't heard it all. So he said, listen, Dave, this is a bit embarrassing, but I think we should call off the interview. So we did. And we packed up all our gear and went home. And then we did an interview a few weeks later instead, and he was so much more happy that I had heard the album, because the album meant so much to Bono, obviously, and to the whole band. So then when we did the interview live on the radio, just a little bit of time afterwards, it was just more fun than anything else. And Bono came in and said, look, we do an interview every single year. Let's just change things. And one way to change things, I know this sounds ridiculous, let's just take all our clothes off. I know that sounds ridiculous, but the head of the radio station came in with his son to see this famous band U2, and he was standing outside that window that I'm looking at now, and there were 5 guys inside on national Irish radio drinking beer, naked, talking. And let's just say his son saved the day by saying, this is fantastic. He was shocked. But it was one of those things. It was just great fun.
This, I was explaining to people the other night, but I might have got it a bit wrong. This is just the end of something for you two. And that's why we're playing these concerts. And we're throwing a party for ourselves and you. It's no big deal, just we have to go away and just dream it all up again.
2 things about that night. Number 1, I had to count down the new decade by going, 25, 24, 23, 22. And I was looking at a clock, which I had in front of me. And then somebody said, no, that's the clock we're supposed to be looking at here, because this gig is going out to other parts of the world as well. And there was a 10-second difference. So I went 25, 24, 23, 8, 7, 6, 5. Nobody had a clue what was going on. And I have to admit to that because it's on film somewhere. So I can't deny it. It just was ridiculous. So the end of the gig was Bono saying we have to go and think it all up again. I never thought about what he said. It never occurred to me till people started writing saying, oh my God, are you two breaking up? This kind of thing. And as it turned out, that's exactly what they did. They did go off and think it all up again. And they were having a terrible time at the beginning. They went to Berlin and it was not going well personally within the band. If they ever had a bad time, this was it. And they had to pull it together, and they brought out Octung Baby. And you can tell me if you think they pulled it together well with that. The whole new part, sort of 3 of U2 started off then, and then they conquered the 1990s. They conquered the zeros as well, the noughties, and they've conquered the last 10 years as well. It's astonishing, the story. But I mean, it's no big deal. It's just we have to go away and dream it all up again. And believe me, that is what they have absolutely done. It never occurred to me that they might have been breaking up, actually. it's always curious up there in the house listening to the albums. I mean, the one thing Bono does all the time is he sits you down and he's so involved with the music that he's just made that he literally is singing the songs. Then he gets up and stamps his foot as though he's singing them on stage, getting into the whole belly of the song, the meaning of it now in terms of not just being in the studio, but the meaning of it now in terms of presenting it to, 60 or 70,000 people a night or whatever. And he uses anybody, I presume, not just me, but it's often that I'm sitting there, okay, and I'm not great on hearing a song for the first time. I need to live with something. I need to even have it as wallpaper for 3 or 4 days before I even start listening to it properly or listening to the lyrics. But it's really funny. Ali usually comes over and says, "Here, Dave, do you want a beer?" As in, no, he's off on one again, the husband. But no, it's funny. It's good, and he does. He loves to play the stuff, and I love to hear it as well, because it's just this whole new sound of U2 coming at me for the first time, and it's just great. And I've many times we've been up there. I remember one time for the pop album I was up there with Adam. I was making some jokes about other musicians and that, which Bono didn't necessarily approve. Adam was on the floor laughing. It's just really funny sometimes. But anyway, I do go up and there's often something funny to say, but one or two things. I remember one time with the Joey Ramone song from Songs of Innocence, the first song, and I was sitting there with the President of Ireland sitting directly in front of me, and Bono just stamping his bell. I woke up every morning, like the President going, "Yes, this is great." It was just the most surreal moment that I'm in the middle of this. But anyway, it's really fun, great fun.
And I give you a song, a light had been turned on. You walked out in the world like you.
No, I've often thought when I talk to the Edge or see some stuff the Edge has done. I remember meeting Edge at a traffic lights once. I was in a car and he was in another car, and I said, "For crying out loud, Edge, this new stuff, I haven't heard anything yet." Well, come back to the house and you can hear some stuff. That's one of the only times. In fact, that the Johnny Cash song they had, I heard that a few years before it ever came up on an album, because that was one of the things he had in his house. But what was I going to say about that? Yeah, no, I mean, I often thought I'd love to get a lot of the Edge's stuff, or all the doodly stuff, or all the extra stuff he's done. I mean, I met him in a pub in Dublin just about a week before the coronavirus sort of lockdown, and he was just showed me his phone and it said 537 or something, like 537 little bits that he constantly puts into his phone anywhere he is, tunes or bits and pieces and odds and ends. And I'd love to try and get my hands on a lot of the stuff that they've done and try and make a mosaic out of it, try and make a kind of a jigsaw out of it, or put the cement in and make a crazy paving. Because I think one of the things U2 should do next is do an album, or even a double album, with 16-minute tracks, 4 16-minute tracks, and just return to the main motif every so often with the guitar bit and the song bit. I'm not saying like Close to the Edge by Yes, or Dark Side of the or Meddle, the track Echoes by Pink Floyd, but I think there's room for a 17 or 18-minute track, and there'll be so many little bits you could stick together, and I just think it'd be great. Anyway, I don't know, that's just the thing I've often thought of. No, get on your boots maybe. I thought, oh, that's a bit sort of ordinary, but I mean, everything turns into what it eventually is, and it's something that you get to like. And no, I mean, there's never been a single that I first listened to and thought that it wouldn't work out, and they've changed their things a lot as well, like there's been different stuff, and they've always been not afraid to experiment, and I like that.
The heroes coming down, the heroes come, the heroes knocking, we're knocking at your door.
Well, they have grown up and grown older, and a lot of people have grown away from them in some ways, I suppose. But I mean, if you follow a band, like when they release album number 20, I'm going to look back and say, oh yeah, album 13 and 14, that was autobiographical, that was Bono growing up in Dublin. And like, if you're with the band, you're with them all the way. And I love albums, because albums can sometimes have bad tracks on them and that, but the whole thing can mean so much to you. And that's really what it is. That's a whole body of work in 1 year. It's like going to a sculptor and seeing all this sort of stuff that the guy has done over 3 years, and you say, oh, I like that piece, I'm not sure about that piece there, and if I had loads of money I'd buy that piece, that kind of thing. And I love all that. That's why I still love the album as a format. And they were on the verge of irrelevance. Now, this thing about being on the verge of irrelevance annoys me, because there's no such thing as being irrelevant or relevant. I mean, you have to sort of stay with the people, and you have to stay with street cred and all that. That's nonsense. Just make music. It doesn't matter. Anyway, there's no such thing as relevance anymore. Music is all over the place. So it doesn't mean anything. You don't have to be in competition like a lot of punk bands are in competition with each other to, I remember Bob Geldof saying to me only recently that he got annoyed if he saw the Clash on the cover of too many music magazines because he thought the Boomtown Rats should be and all that. Those days are long gone. There's no such thing as being relevant anymore. It's just like the fact that Bono, wore his soul on his sleeve and brought out 2 albums of growing up and mentions things like Cedarwood Road, and at the gigs he mentions Cedarwood Road out loud in front of 20,000 people at Madison Square Gardens, which doesn't necessarily mean anything to anybody. I mean, come on, you don't have to do that. I think it's fantastic that they do that, and it's so personal and so autobiographical. It's just brilliant. So they've done the autobiographical stuff now, Songs of Innocence and then Songs of Experience. So who knows what's going to happen next. But it is interesting that they started out all 4 together and from the same school and all the rest of it. And they never had to put an ad up 10 years later on that notice board and say, hey, we've lost our guitarist. Any chance you'd want to be a guitar with this band? And they just get on well, and they're not stupid, and they know how to work it, and they look how well they've done with it all. And I've seen them in places wondering how they even keep their heads together. It is beyond reason what happens to Larry, Edge and Adam. And I don't have to tell you what happens to Bono and just the kind of demands on his time, because when you two aren't doing stuff like in the studio, the amount of stuff that happens with Bono and the amount of world leaders and everything, it's just insane. I don't know how he does it, and he's as down to earth. I mean, people do say he is really, really, really down to earth, and he really is. It is astonishing, the 4 of them. I just don't get it. But they're friends, and Dublin keeps them grounded, which is pretty good. They live here mostly all the time. I think that maybe not always Adam or not always Edge, but they kind of do. No, not really. I just, whatever, I saw them getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, there was a Tuesday nights back in 78, was it, or 79? I don't know. They played a place called the Bagot Inn in Dublin. It's a pub that takes about maybe 100 people at the most, and they played every Tuesday for 6 weeks. The Blades went on first, and I went on first playing records, then the Blades, then me playing records, then U2, then me playing records, and I thought this was pretty good. They got a residency at the Bagot Inn, and then they decided to play a gig at the Stadium in Dublin, which is about 2,000 people, and I thought, this is really stretching it. They're never going to fill that place. And they did well, and it was really good, but I thought that was the ultimate. It never occurred to me they might, even leave the country, let alone become anyway big. I had no idea. No, I just love the progression. I love where they've gone. I love the way they changed it all for the 90s with Achtung Baby, and they did go off and dream it all up again. I love all that, and I think it's great. And I just follow them all the way. And I can see why some people would think, they've been around too long, they've been big too long, I don't care anymore. And I see why other people are only coming onto them now. Like, for instance, when they did that thing with Apple and put the album free, and then Bono came around and actually apologised. The point about it is that I thought he should never have done that. I thought he should never have apologised. I thought it was a brilliant scam, a brilliant thing to do. I already did stuff, actually, for Sirius when 18 months ago, in the summer of 2018, Sirius had a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week programme, a sort of channel for U2. And they did it for a whole month, and it was so successful they did it for a second month. And in a thank you, U2 broke away from the tour that they were doing to do a special gig at the Apollo in Harlem. Which is, about 1,400 or 1,500 people. It was fascinating to see U2 playing in a place where they're just them on stage, and there's no bells and whistles or big screens or anything like that at all. And they're just playing as a band like I might have seen them 100 years ago. And it was great to see them like that. Admittedly, they have such a fantastic back catalogue of songs, but they were really powerful and really together and really good. And they weren't fazed at all by simply having to be U2 stripped down on stage. And of course, it wasn't stripped down sound-wise; it was huge. And the only thing that was funny about, number one, I filmed a lot of it actually on my phone, which is something I don't normally do. But I have a lot of great, really intimate shots of all of that. But more importantly, during one song, the curtain went away at the back, and there was a kind of a balcony, and there's about 10 musicians all dressed in the most colourful gear on stage, blowing into all sorts of wind instruments and trumpets and all the rest of it. And of course it never occurred to me what it might be. It was for Angel of Harlem, because that's where we were, and it was very funny and very good. It was a great night. But I have given them some interviews from the past for that, and no doubt I'll be in touch with them again about this. They had taken me over Sirius XM to that U2 gig, so I'll be in touch with them again about that. I don't know when it's happening, sometime later this year supposedly. Number one, I've no idea. They seem to be making music really all the time. Bono's always very busy doing the astonishing things that he does. I know an awful lot of U2 fans think Bono was brilliant, and some people think, but it's astonishing how brilliant he is and how many things he does and how concerned he is and how intelligent he is about how he approaches everything that he does. And I'm always amazed. I'm just, in awe of the guy, considering he makes me look so lazy and so stupid. But he really is great with what he does, and no doubt he's doing an awful lot of that as we speak. In fact, he's been helping the Irish government out, getting in touch with Tim Cook from Apple and the guy in charge of Alibaba and all that kind of thing in terms of getting stuff in from China for the coronavirus here. And he's constantly working and constantly doing really good things. It's amazing. And I really do take my hat off and bow to his great work, and it's fantastic. So, if they were to do an Achtung Baby 30th anniversary tour, yeah, whatever really they want to do. I'm not that crazy necessarily about that. I mean, they did it with Joshua Tree, and that's doing it once. And I preferred of the last 10 years, Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience, those tours and those gigs. But fine, if they want to do that, I'll be there, no problem. But I don't know if they will do an Achtung Baby 30th anniversary tour. I don't hear any word about it at the moment, but who knows?
Free yourself to be yourself. If only you could see yourself.
Well, you're right in honing in on the word controversy, because it does help if you've had some controversy in your life to make a good drama movie out of it, and that's what people want to see. They don't want to see a hagiography. In other words, they don't want to see just, isn't this guy great or isn't this band great? They want to see it warts and all the problems, all the things that went wrong. And to be honest, not too many things have gone wrong with U2. I mean, they don't really have much that's controversial there. And I don't even know if they'd like to do all that, if they want to be seen that way. I mean, being the most successful band of the 90s, the noughties, and this last 10 years, they don't need to go out there and do another thing like that. But I mean, everybody else is at it. Once Bohemian Rhapsody, hit the box office the way it did, well, let's be honest. I mean, that was like a bit of a dodgy movie, I thought, but it made $1 billion at the box office. So the floodgates are open now for, the golden age of rock and roll to be mined for every penny that it's worth. So the Elton John movie came out, that did well too, Rocket Man, and then there's loads more supposedly, either A as a drama or B as some kind of a documentary. And there's loads of rock documentaries coming out all the time. I just saw one on David Crosby the other day, which is very good. I'm currently watching one on the Go-Go's, but there's one there's so many. And U2, there's been U2 documentary things too, especially on the road type ones. So who knows what might happen? I mean, I believe, Rod Stewart wants one done on him, possibly. I believe Boy George wants one done on him. And it seems, or the talk is, that one of the female characters from Game of Thrones is going to play Boy George. So who knows? I mean, I have no idea if this is going to happen or not, and I have no idea if it's a good thing or not. But there's certainly no talk about it at the moment. There is talk at the moment, because I was talking to Bono about this about a year ago, of a kind of a U2 interactive kind of I don't know what you call it, a museum-y kind of thing in Dublin, especially for tourists to come and see, all the stuff that U2 have done down through the years. I mean, recently I went to see Billie Eilish in Sweden, and in Stockholm I went to the ABBA Museum. And I must say, of all the ones I've been to around the place, I spent two weekends, at least a full weekend, about 3 years ago, when U2 couldn't make it, in U2's place at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in wherever it is. Where is it? The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Ohio. And, obviously that's the big one. But I mean, I think if they had a thing like that in Dublin, that might be good. But I don't know how far the plans for that are going ahead, and sometimes those things get scrapped. Who knows? A movie about U2? Yeah, whatever. I've no idea.
Free yourself to be yourself. only you could see yourself.